Hello and welcome to The Curator on Monocle Radio with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Over the next 60 minutes, I'll be bringing you some of the very best interviews and reports from the past week here on the station. This week we'll look at the highlights of Monocle's April issue.
There's also an amazing story which leads our affairs pages, which is looking at the role that dogs play in airport security in the US.
Plus, we visit a happiness summit.
Finns are not the smiliest and cheeriest people in the world, but we're quite happy with life in general and not too stressed about it. So I think this is also what this summit is all about.
All that and much more in the next hour here on The Curator with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. And we start the show with another live edition of The Globalist in our new studios in Paris. And this time our very own editor-in-chief Andrew Tuck tells us some of the team's adventures in Paris, and he also previews the best of Monocle's April issue.
So obviously you can take a subscription for Monocle and you'll get the magazine sent to you. But a couple of years ago we started, by word of mouth almost, a program called The Patrons, and this is a higher price you pay, but we make sure you get sent every single thing we do. So it's every book, every piece of print that we do. But importantly, we also find some touch points across the year where we bring you into the fold. So last year, after we did the Quality of Life conference in Istanbul, for example, we took a group of patrons away for a couple of days. We went to Bodrum, we went to an amazing beach club, had fun, but also began to connect these people together in interesting ways. So fascinating just hearing your last interview. Last night, one of our patrons had come from Kyiv and talked to our patrons about what was happening in the city. Now, all the tough things, but he pointed out that there's an explosion in real estate investment because people can't take the money out of the country. He showed me his phone during the evening with the alerts for incoming drone attacks. So these people are all fascinating. They've all elected to be connected to Monocle, and they use Monocle as a way, as a bit of social glue between them as well.
I found it amazing meeting them, and they really had come in from all over the world. I did, possibly after a couple of glasses of wine, make one promise, which was to say somebody's name on air.
Let's do it, because we're doing shout-outs now this time. George.
Next we'll be taking requests. But it was wonderful to meet Salvatore Santoro.
Well, we like Salvatore. So, again, it's interesting when you're a brand, the relationship you have with somebody. So he identifies himself as an issue 4 person. So he started his relationship with Monocle all the way back then. He came to that very old office that used to be in Boston Place in London. He's one of the smartest dressed gentlemen you've ever seen. A great suit, funny, entertaining, has lived around Europe, has a knowledge of so many things. So again, what's wonderful for us as editors, as journalists, is you just have to listen to these people's stories, and you also come away informed, engaged. Everybody, we had people who are in finance, in public relations, in government, all here last night. A big producer of fabric from Turkey came, talking about what's happening in Turkey as well. So we just got this rapid briefing, as you said, matched with rather a lot of nice food, and certainly, in my case, a few glasses of champagne.
It really, really was great fun. And of course, one of the other reasons we're here is that today, Monocle hits the newsstands. This is our April edition. Of course, the patrons will have already got it, but it goes everywhere else today. It's lovely. Paris, Tokyo style top 25. Fresh thinking for spring. Talk us through the mag this month.
Well, as you say, it's the Star Top 25. This is produced by Natalie Theodosi, who's our fashion director. We always try to do something with these surveys. Of course, we're going to recommend a good jacket and maybe a nice shirt maker. But what her prism over the issue is she also tries to look at the business behind all of these companies, tries to show that the trends are also about industry and about how we live, and make the cultural connections as well. So she's done an extraordinary job of that. We have an essay section on a special trimmed-in piece of paper that we've put in the issue as well. And there's also an amazing story which leads our affairs pages, which is looking at the role that dogs play in airport security in the US. And it's by Tom Vanderbilt, who's a a regular writer for us, an American writer, and they went to the TSA to see how they train these dogs. So there's some amazing pictures of dogs, but also what's funny is when you start your training, you have essentially a stuffed toy to begin your training with. So they have some rather nice, as you can see here, some rather nice stuffed version.
They're very real looking, aren't they?
Yeah. So
I think it's time though, Andrew, isn't it, for us to produce a Monocle dog jacket?
Well, we did a collar back in the day, but I think that, well, seeing as I'm an owner of a pooch, I think that would be a fine thing to do. And just one last thing that Lexelf and Chris Lord and everybody worked with our Turkey correspondent actually to go back to Syria. So she flew from Istanbul to Damascus with many returning Syrians and followed their journey as they try to set up businesses and, along with many Turkish investors, try and get this country going. So all the tough things that are going on there, but still finding this note of optimism in this very difficult place in the world. So what a range from style and fashion all the way through to contemplative essays and this amazing piece of photo reportage.
And that goes on sale today. And just speaking about that region and this space, there is a connection because, of course, this space hasn't been entirely kitted out by a Lebanese company.
So Cannes Architects, that's K-A-N-N, not Cannes as in the south of France. They were commissioned to design our shop and cafe here on Rue Bachemont. And they have done like the most impeccable job. But what's fascinating is that they work with an atelier that's near Byblos in Lebanon, and they ship back to France the designs, and then they fit it. It's like kit almost. They put it in place. The measurements are unbelievable because it just all snapped into place, and suddenly we had this wonderful premises. So yeah, and a great just one last thing. So come to see us in Rue Bachemont because this morning. It's just so lovely being in the cafe at 8 o'clock. Already regulars in, sitting down, reading their paper, reading the magazine. And I don't know, we're also seeing quite a lot of guests coming from last night who are kind of popping in to say hello. So.
And we're back with a highlight from my show The Stack, all about the world of print media. This time I had the pleasure to speak with the founder of Spain Media, Andrés Rodriguez, on its partnership with Forbes for the brand's first members club, Forbes House Madrid.
Talking about Spain Media, the company is more alive than ever, alive and kicking. We are thinking in a couple of years we will have our 20th anniversary. And on 2025, we are living an incredible year because we have some headlines. First of all, 10 years of Tapas. Tapas, the magazine that I create for try to explain how we are from the point of view of food and drinks, and because we feel that how we drink, how we cook, how we eat, how we share with other people and other countries and other cultures, this kind of living will be a trend. We have this idea 10 years ago, and Tapas is now a strong teenager with a lot of energy, very fresh. The present for the 10 years birthday for Tapas is the born of a foodie international festival that we will celebrate the first edition in Madrid. The name of the festival will be the motto of the magazine. It's called Ñam Ñam Festival. Ñam Ñam is in Spanish is Yummy Yummy, and Yummy Yummy Festival, that in Spanish is Ñam Ñam Festival, and will be a festival international of experience gastronomy. That will be in the last day of summer in September.
And Andrés, if I may say, Tapas is a fantastic magazine. It was a bit of a trendsetter as well, right? Its concept of food and lifestyle, it really, I think, influenced other magazines.
Yeah, I think so. I think when I published the first issue of Tapas, all the food magazines that will be published in the world was about recipes. They teach you how to cook. That's an incredible point of view. But the point of view of Tapas is not just how you need to learn for cooking. It's talk about, I want to dinner with you. I want to lunch with you. I want to have a drink with you. Where I'm going with you if you came to Madrid. Where are going the readers of Monocle if they came to Barcelona or Ibiza for drink? We are going to do a business lunch, or we are going to do, I don't know, fashion dinner, or We are going to make, breakfast with family on Sunday. That's our point of view. We believe that when you choose a restaurant, you choose the clothes you are using to dress for this place. You choose the friends that you want to show them the restaurant, or you choose if you use your tie or or sneakers for the place. That's all is Tapas point of view about. We don't put chefs on the cover. We put fashion people on the cover. We have on the cover Giorgio Armani with a risotto. We have on the cover Tom Ford. We have influencers. We have, architects, because everyone, dinner, breakfast, lunch, invite, cook or not cook, everyone enjoy life through the meal. And that's Tapas point of view. And the festival, the Ñam Ñam Festival in Madrid, will be the experience of this point of view this year.
And I think we must talk now about this very exciting news about Forbes launching in Madrid its first private members club. And I think that's so exciting that the first one is going to be in Madrid because, Forbes is one of your titles and it has such a strong presence in the Spanish newsstand. Every time I go to Spain, and it's really incredible local content as well. So tell us, this is very exciting. When is it going to open? I wonder, what can you tell us a bit about it?
Okay, the club opened 2 months ago. We are in our first quarter of the year. The idea began because I was thinking about how I make the company bigger, how I make Spain Media more influence, how I make more funny the company for my clients, my readers, my brands who trust in the company. Everybody hear about the energy of Madrid last 3 years. We are I think the capital most exciting in Europe now, definitely. And I thought that was a good opportunity to make a business club, just private, just for membership. But from the point of view that the business is modern, and you can do business from a point of view international, globally, modern, fresh, with a style. Business without the style is so bored. It's boring. It's not interesting for me. I thought, okay, we have the brand. I've been publishing an editor-in-chief Forbes during 11 years this year, and in 2025. And the magazine is fresh. We have influencers in the cover. We have new entrepreneurs on the cover. Of course, we do the rich list, but they are not on the cover. We refresh the magazine. We change the typography. We have a beautiful paper. It could be that we are printing one of the most exciting magazines in Spain and in Spanish. I talked with the president of Forbes and I said, okay, why we don't make a club? Why we don't make a physically space to enjoy life, make a business? Enjoy life, make a business. It's a great idea. We build incredible place, 2,000 meters in one building, exclusive just for Forbes. We think about a lot if we name it club or we name it house. And finally, we took the decision to give to the project Forbes House because we feel inside a house. Of course, it's a club, but inside a house, because a house is bigger than a club. It's more home. It's more warm. We opened 2 months ago. We have now more than 500 members in just a couple of months. And the most important thing is not the number of the 500. Most important thing is that we have the most interesting leaders in different professions and jobs in Spain and international. And we are open an incredible bridge for the Latin American countries because they are choosing Madrid, like the new Miami. We have living in Madrid with Mexican businessmen, Mexican entrepreneurs, Venezuelan entrepreneurs. They feel that Spain and Madrid are the real window for our international Spanish-speaking community. And Forbes House has a mission, incredible mission, to connect these communities that Madrid is attracting now.
You are listening to The Curator on Monocle Radio with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. And on the Foreign Desk Explainer this week, it's all about Jeffrey Goldberg has exited the war chat. Yes, indeed, as the US government scrambles to explain why the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic was added to a group chat discussing war plans. Andrew Mueller considers just how serious a security breach this is.
They were running a war plan on a messaging app and didn't even know who was invited into the conversation.
In an unprecedented security breach.
He posted one message saying to Pete Hegseth, "If you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again." Mr. Hegseth replied, "I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic."
After Goldberg started seeing reports of the strikes on social media, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz updated the chat group and described the operation as an amazing job, and then sent 3 emojis: a fist, American flag, and fire.
It is at once grimly amusing and approximately as serious as it gets. Senior officials at the very top of the government of the United States discussing ordering American forces into action somehow add a journalist to the pertinent group chat. Not for the first time in the administrations of US President Donald Trump, we are compelled to consider a scenario which would have been scratched from an early draft of any satire as just honkingly unsubtle. We will come presently to possible explanations, plausible implications, and likely ramifications, but first a brisk recap of the facts. On March 11th, Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, received a connection request on Signal, purporting to come from US National Security Advisor Michael Waltz. Before Goldberg could assume, as any reasonable person might, that the next message would offer him a share in Saddam Hussein's missing gold in exchange for his bank details, he was added to a chat called Houthi PC Small Group. On March 15th, Goldberg witnessed conversations about imminent strikes against the Houthis, an Iranian proxy in Yemen, who have been making pests of themselves taking potshots at shipping navigating the Suez Canal. Among those appearing to participate in these conversations were Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. These strikes duly occurred. Goldberg had had a sensational scoop dropped into his lap. The first question is, how could this happen? Though in US intelligence circles, that question is probably being posed with a phrase rhyming with the cluck in between how and could. There are a couple of possible explanations. One is that Goldberg was deliberately added to the chat as a deft and subtle strategic maneuver in some intricate 9-dimensional chess game occurring far, far beyond the ken of most mortals. The other is that the cabal with which President Donald Trump has surrounded himself are a wretched sack of bungling nitwits. Listeners may arrive at their own judgment vis-à-vis which seems the more likely.
Try to start a group text. You're adding people and you accidentally add the wrong person. All of a sudden your Aunt Mary knows all your raunchy plans for the bachelor party. Well, that kind of happened today with the Trump administration.
The next questions all relate to how serious this actually is.
Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
It seems clear by now that the Trump administration does not propose to take it seriously. Efforts are afoot from the president downwards to blame Jeffrey Goldberg.
I don't know this guy. I know him by his horrible reputation, and he really is the bottom scum of journalists.
The media generally, perhaps an intern who is not inconveniently related to a major donor.
Somebody that was with Mike Waltz, worked for Mike Waltz at a lower level.
Trump-compliant talking heads are trying to laugh it off as no more a faux pas than accidentally copying in that annoying colleague you were all trying not to invite to a drink after work. And yes, guys, it still hurts.
Well, it's a mistake. You know, we make mistakes. We all make mistakes.
So, the big one first. Has anyone actually broken the law? It would appear so. The United States Espionage Act, to start with, mandates up to 10 years in the clink for handling national security material with such carelessness. The Presidential Records Act and the Federal Records Act do not permit use of the disappearing messages facility offered by Signal or other non-official platforms. Indeed, a law dating from 2014 specifically instructs federal employees to copy such messages to an official account for the purposes of preservation. Technically, any US government worker who texts their boss that their train is late should copy it to their government email account. Any such prosecutions, however, would be the responsibility of the US Justice Department, which is to say the current US Justice Department, which appears to agree with President Trump that it serves exclusively at his whim. And not that accusations of hypocrisy have ever bothered Trump much, but locking up half his cabinet for this might prompt recollection of those boxes of classified material with which he absconded from the White House in 2021 and stashed in Mar-a-Lago's bathrooms.
Isn't it amazing? I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up. Look. Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information.
On the upside, this might at last stop American conservatives from wanging interminably on about Hillary Clinton's private email server, which, to be clear, was also bad.
It was a mistake, and I am very sorry about that.
The next question: can we assume that the national security of the United States has been horrifically compromised by the complacency and incompetence of those who have sworn to defend it? The consensus among former intelligence personnel is best imagined as a long, anguished scream from down a well. For it does not seem likely that this was the only off-the-books chat group being convened on a non-government platform, and it has to be reckoned at least possible that other such groups may have been vulnerable, whether through someone inveigling their way aboard or by one of Trump's cabinet copying in someone called Dmitry, Zhang or Ahmad without wondering where they work. And as Signal cannot, by and large, be downloaded onto official government-issued phones, it seems therefore likely that the leaders of the free world were communicating on their personal devices, at which recall last year's revelation that Chinese hackers had accessed the phones of personages including but not limited to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Never mind Jeffrey Goldberg, they might as well have copied in Ayatollah Khamenei. None of this will be reassuring American allies already wondering how reliable a partner the US still is. But did we actually learn anything from the chat that we did not know or could not have guessed? Not really. There was some bitching about Europeans, but they've done plenty of that in public, and there was some deployment of macho emojis, which might have seemed charmingly gauche from 15-year-old boys discussing a win by their football team.
To which Steve Witkoff responded with 5 emojis, 2 hands praying, a flexed bicep, and 2 American flags.
It is arguable that in any kind of normal administration this wouldn't have happened in the first place. But if this had happened in any kind of normal administration, this explainer would have been a recitation of the people who had resigned, been sacked, or possibly arrested as a consequence. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller.
Also this week here on Monocle Radio, we had a very special edition of The Urbanist, live from Nad's Club in London. Monocle's editor-in-chief Andrew Tuck was joined on stage by Muyiwa Oki, the president of RIBA, alongside our executive producer Carlota Rebelo and design editor Nick Muniz, to explore how thoughtful architecture, visionary developers and pioneering city makers can redefine our cities.
Recent studies shows that the buildings that we're going to be using in the next 30, 40 years are already built, 80% of those. So if we want to build for the future, we need to figure out how we're going to use those buildings, the 80%. So it's incumbent upon myself and our community of architects to figure out how we can decarbonize and ensure that these buildings are fit for the future. And one of the mechanisms that we've done to make sure that happens and happens across the board at a consistent level is through standards. This year, or last year rather, September last year, we put together a standard called the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard, which helps architects, developers, and anyone who wants to procure, design a building to figure out what the carbon limits are for various types of buildings and design towards that. So it means that we're leveling the playing field and ensuring that everyone knows what their targets are based on science, as opposed to doing what we do normally and then planting trees in Nicaragua.
Just before I bring in the rest of the team, can I ask you one more question? Because I guess one of the biggest debates we have in London is about the lack of housing, the challenge about affordable housing. We met Sadiq Khan when we were with you the other day, and he said we're building the fastest rate of public housing since the 1970s and the fastest rate of housing, he claimed, since the 1930s, which is great. But one of the questions that came up again and again with people from architecture firms, from engineering firms that we met when we were together was, but are they good designs? Are these buildings going to last? Yeah. When you see these huge target numbers for what we're going to build for housing, how do you come along and say, as Reba, great, but how do we make sure that these are well designed, that good design is part of the debate?
Because we have a definition for what high quality good design is. It needs to have a utility. It needs to have functions so that multiple people want to use it, mixed use. It needs to have an aesthetic integrity, but also sustainability in terms of attachment in relation to the natural environment. And if you can think about and design that into the project, whether it's housing or commercial, we begin to bring communities together, knit communities together, and make sure that the good design or the design fabric of the design is such that people actually want to live there and use it.
A lot of nodding going on from both my colleagues. Carlotta?
It really reminds me of something that actually the World Economic Forum, in partnership with the developers Avison Young, released last year, which is this thing called the Social Value Playbook. And they came up with 6 principles that developers, local authorities, architects, investors should consider when creating new spaces in cities. How do you account for that social value? And they started by asking what these different groups identified as a social value. And everyone immediately said, oh, it's affordable housing. But it's exactly as you were describing, Maria. It's about, adding those spaces for socializing. It's about extending the living room into public areas. It's about connectivity. Some of the points raised in our film as well, safety after hours, after dark. And now they've, over the past 6 months of the playbook being in place, they've shared how many cities around the world have started to adopt it, including Madrid was the latest one in a huge new project that they have called the Madrid Nuevo Norte, which is the biggest redevelopment project at the moment in Europe, set to be completed in the next 5 years. And it's just incredible to see how those conversations, once they are a bit more standardized and once the principles and the guidance is in place, then it becomes way easier to engage all these stakeholders to actually adopt it and implement it in their designs, in their work, in their plans.
Nick?
Yeah, being an Australian, I love a rule book. We are a nanny state. We like being told what to do. So I think those sorts of things are really incredible, and actually brings to mind the City of Melbourne released this amazing design guide. And in the film, we're talking about very briefly in there, but, celebrating an era, what's ugly today might be beautiful tomorrow. And I think we've got to be careful about having prescriptive guidelines around something like aesthetics and taste. I think that's incredibly limiting. But what Melbourne has done phenomenally well, and, you go to this city, many people been to Melbourne? One bloke at the back, that's nice. Two people, okay. Australian tourism campaign's not going well. But Melbourne's this phenomenally vibrant and lively city, from 6 a.m. when the coffee shops open till 1 a.m. when the bars close. And what they've done really well is the city has built this set of guidelines that it's not about how you should build and how you should design, but rather where should you place your service cabinets, not on the front of the building, because then all of a sudden that stops you being able to put a coffee shop in. It's like, should you have retail that's flush with the street, or set up a few levels, make it flush with the street, because people are more likely to wander into the shop. And I think it's those sorts of details that our cities need to think about. I think We need to be less worried about what a building maybe is going to look like and more about how it's going to encourage us to behave.
UBS has over 900 investment analysts from over 100 different countries.
Over 900 of the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in the world of finance today.
To find out how we could help you,
contact us at ubs.com.
And you have more great items here in The Curator with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. On the Monocle Daily this week, we had our weekly letter from. This time is from Monocle's Chiara Di Mel. She takes us on a tour of Senegal's capital.
Downtown Dakar is a noisy place. Senegal's capital has the kind of traffic that sneaks up on you, the sort of unexpected gridlock that turns a 10-minute journey into a 2-hour one, accompanied by its fair share of impatient beeping. And then there's the construction sounds. Tall buildings keep shooting up on these streets in a relentless expansion, so much so that truckloads of sand await on the side of many pavements to be turned into another high-rise. It's easy to forget when you're in the middle of its tight centre that this is in fact a city surrounded by nature, kissed by the sea on 3 sides. Jutting out of the continent on the Cap Verde Peninsula, it peeks out into the Atlantic on a little pointy tip. All you need to do is leave the grind of its residential areas behind and head to the Corniche. There, the landscape suddenly opens up, the light feels even stronger and the din a lot more subdued. I had spent the whole day walking through markets from one modernist cement tower block to the other when I decided it was time to make for the coast. But not just any bit of it. I would trace the whole outline of the city to end up in the neighbourhood of Les Almadies, up in the northwestern corner. Zooming up the seafront, my weather-beaten yellow and black taxi drove past some of Dakar's most renowned landmarks, the vast expanse of the Place du Souvenir Africain, the colossal African Renaissance monument, and the colourful, tall Mosque de la Divinité, only to arrive to the maritime suburb in little more than 20 minutes. Stepping out on the unpaved, dusty road felt like being in a different city altogether, one made of luxurious villas and bohemian beachside bar shacks with its own breezy charm. And yet, as is often the case when we find ourselves on promontories or peaks, the temptation to walk past all these establishments onwards and further to reach the very tip of this peninsula was too strong to resist, particularly because La Pointe des Almadies isn't just any spot. It is in fact the westernmost point of the whole African continent and of the Afro-Eurasian landmass, if you consider these giant bits of the earth as a whole. So I walked on, past a deserted construction site, via a checkpoint for a private beach, beyond where the official roads on the map go. It was when I was traversing the fascinating if haunting abandoned Club Med site that a guard stopped me in my tracks. "Is this the way for the Pointe?" I asked, slightly disoriented and incredulous that such a significant location in the world's geography could really be hiding here, with no signs, tourists, or paths to speak of. He eventually waved me on, so I traced the edge of the hotel's empty pool to arrive on the sand on the other side. All of a sudden, I could see it, the Pointe stretching into the sea, where it broke off into a constellation of dark basaltic rocks, half peeking up from the Atlantic. Shockingly, there was no one else around, only me and the waves from either side of this tongue of land crashing into each other just past the shore. I took my shoes off and gingerly walked into the water. It was cold, but not too much. Looking ahead in the afternoon haze, you could make out the outline of a small lighthouse emerging from the sea, Le Chaussée des Almadies. The ocean stretching in front of me felt impossibly big, awe-inspiring and terrifying all at once. In a place like that, in a city like Dakar, it's impossible for images of the slave trade not to come rushing in. Millions of people were trafficked from the infamous island of Gorée on the other side of Dakar's peninsula, only to be forced onto boats that made the transatlantic crossing. The immensity of that number, the dreadfulness of that journey, the weight of that past felt suffocating in the blinding light. Then another realization struck me. For the half hour or so that I was sat on that rock, on the Pointe des Almadies, I was the single westernmost person in the entirety of Afro-Eurasia. Me and 6.7 billion people to the east of my body, roughly 86% of the world's entire population. Perhaps that's the reason why we cannot resist walking to the tip of whichever peninsula we find ourselves on, to the top of the mountains and hills. We long for something to remind us of how tiny but important each existence is in the face of the magnitude of history and the world beside us. I took a big breath, put my shoes on and made my way back to the city. Just one of the 6.7 billion people on this landmass of ours. For Monocle in Dakar, I am Chiara Rimella.
Also in our news shows this week, Nordic nations will be basking in the glow of last week's World Happiness Report, which once again put Scandinavian countries at the top of the list. And as if to gloat, the region is currently holding its first ever Nordic Happiness Summit in Helsinki, Finland, which not coincidentally was named the world's happiest nation for the 8th year running. Petri Burtsov, Monocle's Helsinki correspondent, joins us on the line from the summit now.
Chris, all I can say is I am happy to join the show.
That's it? Come on. No, there must be like balloons. I mean, paint a picture for us. What does a happiness summit look like?
Okay. Chris, look, I just snuck out of the seminar or the conference room. I've been listening to talks all day, and I'm looking out the window. We're on this island, in this island resort just outside the coast of Helsinki, and it's actually snowing outside. It's really great. It's like plus 2 degrees. So this is not sort of like all the cheeriest people in the world coming to this island to celebrate happiness, but this is really something a lot deeper, and this is what the summit is all about. One of the speakers is a person who wrote, one of the authors of the World Happiness Report, and I think about the first thing that he said was that the report is actually not about happiness at all, that it's about well-being and life satisfaction and so on. So I just have to put this thing to rest, once and for all, that Finns are not the smiliest and cheeriest people in the world, but we're quite happy with life in general and not too stressed about it. So I think this is also what this summit is all about.
So the point is to manage expectations. Is that what you're getting at? I do realize there are some serious aspects to this, particularly the economics.
Yeah, so actually one of the talks was about sort of the relationship between money and happiness. There was also a talk about the role that governments can play in fostering happiness, and then also about happiness in workplaces. We spend something like I think the speaker said like 90,000 hours of our lives in the office or working. It has a major effect on how happy we are, but we should maybe talk about it more. So then there was also sort of this study that they revealed that happiness is good for the economy, for the well-being, and for society. So this summit is actually, a lot of the participants are academics and researchers here. So it's kind of it's all joking aside, it's actually quite a serious seminar looking at how happiness is formed and what kind of effects it has.
And is this for the Nordics themselves, would you say, or are they offering advice for the rest of us poor schmucks who haven't quite figured out how to be happy yet?
I think maybe the latter. I mean, I've mostly heard sort of Swedish and Finnish, but I also heard Italian. I saw some people from, I think they were from India or from the neighboring countries. So, it's not a massive event. There's only 240 participants. It's an invite-only event, but there are many nationalities present. But it's, as the name suggests, it's very Nordics focused.
And the theme is togetherness. Let's also speak a little about that. What does that mean exactly?
I think it refers to, partly I think it refers to how the Nordic countries together can sort of do something about sort of make use of the soft power aspects of being such a happy part of the world. But then it's also about the role that societal sort of togetherness and inclusion and doing stuff together, the role that plays on happiness. There was one study that they showed about how people who dine together tend to be happier in general and more satisfied with their lives. So I think that's also one aspect of togetherness. Maybe Chris, you're going out for a pint or for a dinner with friends tonight to make your life happier.
And for Monocle Design Extra, my first Sony cassette recorder, we take a trip down memory lane to find out why this toy offers a glimpse into a much bigger moment in design history.
I remember when I was little, I was mesmerised by the magic of tape, cassette tape. Seeing it spool and rewind behind the transparent plastic of my family's chunky black portable stereo as though you were taking to a sonic picnic.
But I cannot tell when I'll be coming home.
And don't forget that ever so satisfying clink as he pushed the cassette holder back into place. But look, it's been a while since I've crossed paths with a cassette. In my adult life, cassettes have become handy bookends, and a cursory glance at my spines would reveal several EPs from Melbourne punk bands and my mum's old cassettes of 1980s Whitney. So you can only just imagine my surprise when I stumbled upon the My First Sony cassette recorder on a visit to Hong Kong's M+ Design Museum, sitting beneath a glass-covered plinth. It looks as if a mini keytar and a drum machine had a baby. Clad in bright red plastic, there's a blue cassette holster next to an external speaker covered by a diagonal plastic grille. The recorder's main buttons were clustered across the bottom lip of the recorder, like the tabs you tear off from an ad on a community notice board. And of course, a bright red button left you in no doubt about how to record onto tape. Then you've got the drum pads, though they also double as animal sounds. Cats, pigs and birds embossed over the buttons labelled tom-tom or cymbal. Childhood flashbacks aside, I thought seeing this in a design museum was a masterstroke, because through this object, it wasn't just an opportunity for this ageing millennial to get nostalgic, but instead discover the post-war history of Asia through this one object. This recorder was one of 500 design objects on display when I visited M+, and each one told a different story about Asia's development, from a space-age 1950s Toshiba rice cooker to a model of Van Mollivan's National Sports Stadium in Phnom Penh, a structure blending modernism with Angkor Wat. As for this recorder, it was yet another symbol of Japan's economic heft and burgeoning soft power by the end of the 20th century. After all, Sony had the world's ears with the invention of the Walkman in 1979, which was also on display.
Paradise. Walking stereo, Walkman, Sony.
But unlike the first Walkman, 1988's My First Sony cassette recorder, or TCM 4040 if you want to look that up later, came with a bright yellow lollipop mic, meaning you could freestyle over those animal or drum samples if you so desired. Just freestyling. You were also able to see the cassette spooling back and forth as the tape deck had a transparent plastic window. Remember, this was the era for it. From Game Boys to iMacs to the Nintendo 64, clear plastic casing was in. For their part, Sony says the transparent design of the My First Sony series was to spark children's lasting interest in science and technology. But they also capitalised on a gap in the market. While it was aimed at kids, Sony's My First line certainly weren't toys. These were bridging products for parents who weren't ready to give their kids a delicate and expensive Walkman, but were happy to give them electronics cased in enough plastic and rubber to withstand knocks and drops. Kinda like how kids today get the dumb phone before the smartphone.
I like macaroni, but what I love is My First Sony.
Now Sony makes small products for small people. Walkie-talkies, Walkman stereos, and cassette recorders. Specially made for kids.
Now, it's not hard to be cynical about this line being a gateway drug to get kids hooked on Sony products from cradle to grave. And it was. But to me, the My First cassette recorder managed to do something else too. Because when I was reacquainted with it at M+, I realised there are certain objects that, while never being touted as a design classic, managed to stay with you for a lifetime. And it's not lost on me that me, a radio maker, has a particular fondness for this cassette recorder. But don't just take it from me. Take it from the millions of other kids who were inspired to get their voices on tape or to make new music on this device, or many of the other bootleg editions that were made in its wake. For Monocle, I'm Alan Whedon.
Now on, you talk now. It's recording.
This is Elmo, and this is the polar bear.
Now it's time for a bite-sized business story from Eureka, the spin-off show of the entrepreneurs. Ian Flood is an architect turned entrepreneur. In 2013, he and his flatmate, Chris Prosser, had a simple idea: chess pieces shaped like buildings. That idea became Skyline Chess, a company crafting city-themed sets featuring landmarks like the Burj Khalifa and Eiffel Tower. More than a decade later, it's a thriving business with collaborations from Chanel to the Vatican Museum. Here is Ian with more on their Eureka moment.
We make chess sets based on different cities from around the world. We started with London. This was the first city we did. Now we've got 12 different cities. And the idea is you can play cities against each other. So you could have London versus New York, Paris versus Dubai. We do completely custom sets. So a developer could make a chess set based on their city or their portfolio. And these can be used as corporate gifts or a showpiece for the office. So myself and Chris were both architects. We used to be flatmates. We'd play chess together in the evenings, and it was over a game of chess where we had the idea to swap pieces with buildings. So we started with London, and we designed it, 3D printed our first set, crowdfunded it, and then we've gone from there. We take the form, and we use the architectural language of the original chess set. So the bishop has a mitred hat, for example, and that's played by the Gherkin in the London edition, and the Chrysler Building in the New York edition. The knight is always a flat profile piece, so we've used a London Eye and the Flatiron Building, and then the King and Queen are always the tallest two buildings. So we do acrylic pieces, which is our entry level, and we do stainless steel and bronze. So we use investment casting. And we have a foundry in Istanbul, and then we do smaller runs in the UK in the Jewellery Quarter in Birmingham. So the pieces are playing over the city itself, and then we screen print these all in the UK by hand. We do wooden boards and marble boards as well. We're in the Shard, we've been in Harrods, Liberties, Selfridges, and 2 years later we launched New York, and that was what really took us off. So we're a bestseller in the MoMA. At the moment, we're pretty busy with the chess sets. We do have a range of playing cards, which we do all the illustrations, all the cards to buildings on them. And we're expanding that this year. But at the moment, it's new cities. So Riyadh is going to be the next one. We're also doing an Indian Monuments edition, which is a countrywide set. And then, hopefully more bespoke projects at the same time.
And finally, we always like to end the curator with something that is food-related. This time, Monocle's Hannah Lucinda Smith is in Damascus to sample some renowned shawarma in the Syrian capital.
In the heart of old Damascus, at lunchtime, you'll find customers queuing up at Al Sadiq for a taste of their famous shawarma. The spit-roasted meat wrapped in fresh pita bread is a staple in the Syrian capital, and it started here in 1906 when Sadiq al-Kabaz travelled to Istanbul, then capital of the Ottoman Empire, to learn how to make the dish. His great-grandson Ahmed al-Kabaz tells me the story over lunch in the restaurant's courtyard with its tinkling fountain and crowd of lunchtime diners.
Okay. He went to Turkey, first of all, his great-grandfather, to learning about shawarma. Then he comes back to Damascus. But he said this meal is not Turkish. ما لها تركية، أكلة سورية.
لا تركية.
تركية.
هو تعلمها هنيك.
تعلمها بتركيا. It's Turkish.
بس حاليا الاتراك بيجوا لهون بياكلوا الاكله تبعنا مو موجوده عندهم.
But he said this meal doesn't exist in Turkey.
Yeah, I live in Turkey and this is definitely different.
صح ولا غلط؟
هو تعلمها بتركيا.
بغض النظر بسوريا.
وقت اجى فتح هون كان اول مطعم شاورما بسوريا كلها.
He said this is the first branch for shawarma in Syria, in whole Syria.
How does it feel knowing that you're related, that you're the great-grandson of somebody who brought something so iconic to this
شو
country?
شعورك وقت أنت بتكون الحفيد لشخص عمل شيء مميز بالشارع؟
طبعا شيء مميز جدا يعني.
It's
احنا فخورين بالشيء اللي عمله يعني احنا هلا ماشيين على
very
نفس
proud.
الخطوه تبعه.
and they are keep going on.
Today, this is one of two branches of Al Sadiq in the city, a traditional Arab-style house with a courtyard and mezzanine level. The family still own the restaurant and the recipe, and Ahmed was born in this very building.
He said they built the house before 500 years ago. This house.
On a Tuesday lunchtime, the restaurant is full of hungry Damascenes. There's no menu here. The order is always the same, a table full of mezes to start.
And tabban and hummus.
What are these?
Burak.
Burek.
You know it?
Yeah, same. Pastry has that cheese, yeah.
Cheese inside it. And this is fatoush.
I know
Or
fatoush.
salad. Syrian salad.
Then the shawarma in a piping hot pile in the middle. Al Sadiq's is made only with lamb, which has to be the very freshest and cleanest, Ahmed says. And then there are the secret spices.
Here is better because they have the secret. And it's a handmade. Everything here is handmade. By the secret keeper.
Are you going to tell me the secrets?
Of course not. Of course not.
Does anybody outside the family know the secret?
في حدا بيعرف السر غيرك؟ Only the family.
Al Sadiq stayed open throughout Syria's civil war. The economic crisis has battered the business, but tourists are slowly returning to Damascus. And Ahmed says that nothing in their shawarma has changed.
He said that's meals that we have eaten before. It's the same taste since 118th year. The same details, same taste and same details. Nothing changed.
For Monocle in Damascus, I'm Hannah Lucinda Smith.
And that's all we've got time for this week's edition of The Curator. The show was produced by David Stevens and presented by me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Join us again next week to hear some of the very best of the programs here on Monocle Radio. Thank you for listening.